Good morning to our participants in the US. Good afternoon to our participants in Europe. A very warm welcome to our online event about strategic international ties at the local level, based on the case of Northern Virginia here in the US and the region Stuttgart in Germany. This online event is jointly hosted by the German Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung, or Konrad-Adenauer Foundation in English, and the Northern Virginia Regional Commission, NVRC. My name is Paul Linartz. I'm head of the Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung office to the US in Washington, DC. Just a few weeks ago, we published a policy paper by Dr. Dale Madarius, Senior Regional Planner with the Northern Virginia Regional Commission, and retired Ambassador Richard Kaslarich, co-director of CESP, Schar School of Policy and Government at the George Mason University, about the very topic of this online event. Both Dale and Richard are here with us today to firstly present the key findings of the paper and to discuss the potential and the challenges of international cooperation for local governments with our distinguished panelists, both from the US and from Germany. Dale, Richard, thank you so much again for your very interesting paper, and I really appreciate the opportunity to cooperate with you today. I'm sure this event will provide a lot of food for thought on both sides of the Atlantic. Before I hand over the microphone to Dale Madarius for a short PowerPoint presentation, I would like to at least briefly introduce our panelists and our moderator. Robert W. Lazaro Jr. serves as Executive Director for the Northern Virginia Regional Commission, NVRC. Mr. Lazaro has a long history of public service in the community, serving 8 years as mayor and 2 years as town councilman in the town of Purcellville, Virginia. During his service, the town was recognized in a number of areas for strong financial stewardship, environmental protection, and sustainability. Under Lazaro's leadership, Purcellville became the smallest town in Virginia to achieve a AAA bond rating with its first foray into the bond market. Lazaro has served in the leadership and statewide and regional organizations, including as the current vice chairman of the Virginia Land Conservation Foundation, former chairman and vice chairman of the NVRC, and an active participant in the Transatlantic Urban Cities Dialogue with colleagues from Germany and Canada. Lazaro holds a degree in public administration from St. John's University, and he is an appointee of the governor of Virginia. Dr. Nicola Schelling is regional director of Verband Region Stuttgart since 2014. Before taking her current office, she was head of the representation of the state of Baden-Württemberg to the EU in Brussels. Prior to that, she managed the Department of Cross-Border and Interregional Cooperation at the State Ministry of Baden-Württemberg and worked as a national expert at the European Commission in Brussels. From 2014 until February 2021, she was president of METREX, the network of European metropolitan regions and areas. Nicola Schelling studied law in Marburg and Paris and started her career as a judge. John Taylor Chapman has not been here with us. He was not able to access our online meeting, but he'll hopefully join us later on. Is a member of the Alexandria City Council and board of the NVRC. He was first elected to City Council in November 2012 and re-elected in November 2015 and November 2018. As a third-term member of the City Council, he has previously served on a number of local and regional boards, ranging from the Local Emergency Planning Committee to the Children, Youth and Families Collaborative Commission. John Chapman currently serves on the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments, Public Safety and Human Services Committee, the Sister Cities Committee, and various other commissions and committees. John, who is a fourth-generation Alexandrian, received his bachelor degree in social studies education. He is a 2010 graduate of the Sorensen Institute for Political Leadership at the University of Virginia. John has received a number of awards for his leadership and community service, including Top 10 Under 40 from the Virginia Leadership Institute. Helmut Noe was deputy mayor of the city of Leonberg from 1992 until 2009. He was responsible for the city's finances, social affairs, public security, and utilities. He has a long history of public service, as he was also mayor of Höfingen, a city district of Leonberg, from 1975 until 1992. Helmut Noe studied public administration and started his career at the county of Freudenstadt and at the town of Baiersbronn. He's a member of the County Council of Böblingen since 1988 until today and is group chairman of the CDU party in the council. He's a member of the supervisory board of the district's clinics and a member of the administrative board of the district's saving bank, as we say in Germany, Kreissparkasse. Besides, he is a member of the Regional Assembly of Stuttgart region since 1999 and member of the Transport Committee. Please let me also, at least briefly, introduce our today's moderator. Retired Ambassador Richard Kaslarich is a distinguished visiting professor at the George Mason University Shah School of Policy and Government. He is co-director of the Center for Energy Science and Policy, CESP. Ambassador Kaslarich was National Intelligence Officer for Europe on the National Intelligence Council from 2003 to 2011 after a 32-year career in the Foreign Service. He served as United States ambassador to Bosnia and Herzegovina and to Azerbaijan. He was senior deputy to the Secretary of State and the President's special representative to the newly independent states, NIS, in 1993 and 1994. He was Deputy Assistant Secretary of State in the Bureau of European Affairs in 1991 and to 1993, responsible for relations with the former Soviet Union and economic ties with the European Union. Ambassador Kaslarich also served as Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for International Organization Affairs in 1984 and to 1986, and as Deputy Director of the State Department's Policy Planning Staff in 1986 to 1989. He received his AA from Blackhawk College, his BA from Valparaiso University, and MAs from Indiana University and the University of Michigan. Before Richard is going to lead us through today's discussion with our distinguished panelists, we are going to kick it off with a brief PowerPoint presentation by Dr. Dale Madarius. Dale has worked as a senior regional planner for the Northern Virginia Regional Commission, NVRC, since 2007. He currently co-leads the NVRC's regional climate mitigation, resilience, and international programs. Prior to working for NVRC, Madarius spent approximately 20 years at the Office of International Affairs at the United States Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, in Washington, D.C. At EPA, he helped manage the agency's programs for urban sustainability, Eastern and Western Europe, the OECD, and the Middle East. He serves as a board member of the American Friends of the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation and the Friends of the Goethe Institute. Madarius has a PhD in environmental design and planning from Virginia Tech University, an MS in cartographic and geographic science from George Mason University, and an MGA in government from the University of Pennsylvania, and a BA in international relations from the University of Redlands. To all our distinguished panelists, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a real pleasure to have you here with us. To our participants, while or after we had our discussion with our panelists, we are happy to answer questions from the audience within the next, let's say, 60 to 75 minutes. For this, please feel free to enter your questions into the Q&A. Thank you so much again from my side. Dale, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. What a privilege to be part of this whole process. We have such a great story to share, and I feel really, really privileged to be able to share it with you. The context that led to not just this webinar, but the paper that Rich and I helped write starts with this slide. There's lots of attention right now on local governments getting engaged globally. There's a number of different initiatives within different think tanks. There's actually proposed legislation up on Capitol Hill in the form of the Cities and Diplomacy Act. There's lots of focus in multilateral fora, climate conventions on the importance and the role of cities and ways in which they can contribute and help make their work more sustainable. The question is, unfortunately, that it's a big world. There's many countries. There's many cities. There are many different issues on which to work. And the challenge is that past work by cities internationally is sort of stigmatized. It's seen as boutique. It's seen as fun trips, kind of frivolous. More often than not, unfortunately, it's seen as wasteful, junkets and boondoggles. And I attribute that because there's never really been much or too much consideration of strategic planning, ways in which when cities engage, they can find outcomes that benefit Main Street. In other words, answering the fundamental questions that a mayor, a county commissioner, a school superintendent, the head of a water utility is going to have about how global engagement will help them meet the objectives of their day job. And there are these very serious issues we've got in our region, all across the country, that we share with infrastructure, with public health, with climate change, with social despair. And at the same time, there are so many things that other countries, other regions like Stuttgart are doing really well. And it just seems natural to try to marry these two, the problems that we face with opportunities to learn from policy and technical innovations that exist overseas. So who are we? We're a regional council of governments. We're a state agency. Our board of 25 members is comprised of people like John, cities like Alexandria, counties like Fairfax. We're a globally engaged region, economically, socially. We have a very diverse demography. We have many different companies, US and foreign-based. And we have a tremendous number of research institutions, universities like George Mason that are also globally engaged. And so that offers us a huge number of opportunities with which to work. But there's a need for strategy. There's a need for a series of Jersey walls, so to speak, to help us figure out what we do, but also sort of what do we avoid. So if there's a slide that helps sort of clarify the ways in which we've worked, it's the attached. It's these three core points which guide the work over the last 20 years of the Northern Virginia Regional Commission. First and foremost, it's unilaterally transferring innovations from abroad. There's a tendency, I think, in the United States to think that we have all the answers and to try to, in some sense, preach or tell other countries and other cities what they should be doing. And I think the way to narrow a focus on a number of topics and a number of countries or a number of cities with which to work is to just start with the basics. What is an outcome as a result of international engagement that will result in some kind of benefit economically, environmentally, and socially to a city like Alexandria, a county like Arlington, or a city like Falls Church? The second filter in that context is, what are the innovations out there? How can we benefit? The second point, prioritizing countries, is a means of making bulletproof the argument or the process of working with a handful number of countries. And that prioritization process up to date has been grounded mostly in economic interconnectedness drawn from state level data, investment, trade, and tourism. And so what we find is that countries like Germany, Switzerland, Canada, the Netherlands, these are countries that not only offer us innovations on climate resilient infrastructure or renewable energy or transportation or workforce training, they're also the countries that are investing in our region. It's companies like Lidl, it's companies like VW or Rehau in the case of Germany that are creating high-paid, high-wage, high-benefit jobs. They're also bringing research and development dollars to our region. And then third, a really, really key point of the way in which we work is partnerships with our region's commercial, academic, science, and civil society institutions. Being able to work with Rich and his colleagues over at Mason to help us accelerate and apply these innovations that we find beneficial to our region. So I just want to give a short summary of where we've been over the last 20 years, in particular with the relationship with Stuttgart, which started in 1999. Some of the earliest green infrastructure initiatives in the country started as a result of these conversations and led to applications of green rooftops in places like the Arlington County Government Building. Some of the low impact stormwater development techniques and permeable surface stormwater fees that the Stuttgart region had implemented became ensconced in some of our work and codes and programs like the 4 Mile Run Watershed Restoration Plan in the city of Alexandria and Arlington County. The solar map of Stuttgart, the climate atlas, informed the development of our Solarize program in Northern Virginia. And a piece of that was the solar map that you can use to realize returns on investment of your purchase or installation of solar PV. We supplied data sets to George Mason University. They had the computers and the computing power that help us generate these maps, which are so important to our renewable energy programs of the region. Looking ahead to the short and long term, what we've realized is that there is a need to understand at the local level this global economic interconnectedness. There's a desire to understand in particular ways in which local jurisdictions like Arlington are drawing investment from countries like Germany. They've started a process that we think could be replicated at other local governments, not just in our region, but also across the country. And what we're hearing is that the costs of mapping, of accessing the data and interpreting it in the form that Arlington County has started is not too much. And that there's a high payoff when elected officials understand this dynamic. And again, not just investment, but trade and tourism. Also, one of the most formal institutional operations of a local government internationally are the economic development departments. And so we think that there is incredible value if understanding this dynamic were made more clear in the boundaries of a local government. We want to continue to draw from the research, the science institutions of our region, the NGOs. Infrastructure is a huge project. Promoting climate resilience infrastructure is a priority for all our local governments. We want to figure out ways in which we can draw from the science, the technical expertise of organizations like the American Society of Civil Engineers, which is based just down the road, the School of Engineering at George Mason University, and then counterparts at places like the University of Stuttgart, and formalize relations, make cross-national science and technology collaboration, not just the domain of basic research, but also how it can include space for applied research in support of local sustainability. Draw in the Northern Virginia Community College into workforce training transfers, how we can basically work with this rich galaxy of educators and teachers to take advantage of the German paid apprenticeship program and apply it through VW or Lidl. Looking ahead, this is a project that actually started completely on its own. The wastewater treatment utility in Alexandria had been working with a counterpart in Innsbruck, Austria, to apply a nitrate extraction technology that was high performing and low cost. And so this is an example of something that existed already that we'd like to include into our work and build on and support and then expand across the region, and then use it as an example of a very important critical piece of our infrastructure, and demonstrate that when we work internationally, again, there's not just an environmental, but there's a bottom line economic benefit to the taxpayer, to the operations of something like Alexandria Renew. Mentioned workforce training program. This is a huge priority for our region. We see it as a huge opportunity for the future in terms of drawing not just lessons through the community college, but also with the local school districts. Something that has been very, very special to work on over the last couple of months, thanks to John, has been to introduce or build on the work of the Equal Justice Initiative and the National Memorial for Peace and Justice in Montgomery, Alabama. Brian Stevenson, the founder, the creator of the process, drew a lot of inspiration for ideas and design for the memorial and the initiative from Germany's experiences with interpreting the Holocaust, as Alexandria and other local governments of our region take receipt of the duplicate columns. We're taking advantage of the assets like Virginia Tech University School of Architecture and Planning and the Alexandria Community Remembrance Initiative to carry the interpretation potential further, look for ways in which not only the placement of the column can be informed by what German cities like Berlin or Stuttgart have done, but also other areas that are in need of interpretation, historical interpretation that involve racial injustice. Water or climate resilient infrastructure is a huge issue for us. Again, what they've done in Stuttgart in the Remstal inspired a lot of our elected officials when we were there. We see potential applications, again, through our partners of applying some of those lessons here in the case of Arlington County or other parts of the region. And then finally, there's a lot of social potential. There's mental health crises, there's the opiate crises, there's the deaths of despair crises. What is it that we could learn from some of the social welfare, the mental health programs in places like Stuttgart, and apply to the benefit of our own work? I'd be remiss if I didn't say it's not just about the technical and the policy transfer. That's fundamental, but there's a profound human component to this as well. And that's sort of embodied in this picture. I just want to say special thanks to Nicola, to Helmut, to the Adenauer Foundation, to Rich, to John, everybody for being part of this. It's a great program. We think it has statewide applications and national applications, and would love to help answer any questions that our participants might have. Thank you very much.
Dale, thank you for that excellent presentation, and I want to join you in thanking the Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung and NVRC for making not only the webinar but the report possible. What we're going to do in the time remaining is both answer questions as they come in from the audience, but also pose a few questions to the panelists to get this conversation going at a very practical level. There's a lot of talk in Washington about a U.S. foreign policy for the middle class, and I think what Dale has described and what we're looking at is how do you develop a foreign policy from the middle class? In other words, starting at the local level. And so I'd like to turn first to Bob. You've been part of NVRC's work with Stuttgart now for 14 years. Goes back to the time when you were mayor of Purcellville. But say a little bit from your perspective of what makes this partnership special for Northern Virginia, and how the region as a whole, Dale has pointed out several of those already, but how the region as a whole has benefited through its work with the Stuttgart region.
Well, thank you, Ambassador. And first and foremost, I want to thank the Adenauer Foundation as well for their generous amount of time and working with us and yourself and Dale on developing this paper. You know, from my perspective, this has been invaluable. It has allowed us to share best practices with our local governments from what is considered by most world-class planning, environmental activities, transportation planning, et cetera, in the world. And our friends in Stuttgart, Helmut Noe and others have been incredibly generous with their time in sharing them with us. You know, I'll give you a simple example. It's been well known Virginia has not been a leader in the past in solar. Our Solarize program has resulted in over $12 million worth of private sector work as a result of our Solarize program. And so those are real jobs, real efforts that have resulted in people being assisted, either whether or not putting solar on their home or creating jobs in our region. Virginia is now 4th ranked in the United States in terms of installed solar. And those lessons are not lost on me in how we were guiding policy for years and advocating for policy for years around solar in the Commonwealth. So that's just one simple example. The other examples that Dale showed are real as well, but it literally created jobs here in our region that were not here before. So we're grateful for that, and the last picture, I think, for the people value to this. Many of the people in the delegation have been in our home in Purcellville and are good friends, and we appreciate that.
Good. Frau Schelling, you know, you've been involved in international engagement with your region as well. You know, both Dale and Bob have laid out ways that we work with the regions, but you know, it'd be interesting to get your perspective on, you know, from Stuttgart's point of view. You know, how do you work with other, not just, you know, in the U.S., but counterpart regions across Europe? I know you have an office in Brussels, so your finger is on the pulse of what's going on in the EU. But you know, give us a sense of how, you know, how that plays out, seen from the Stuttgart end.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for the question. I would just quickly like to thank Bob for the kind and Dale for the kind words. He already talked about our relationship. Our mutual exchanges have been inspiring for us, and later we will talk more in detail about how we benefited from our partnership as well. But to answer your initial question, Stuttgart is already a very international region. People from all parts of the world call Stuttgart their home, and we depend strongly on migration and attracting new workforce in order to keep our economy running. As a location, Stuttgart region is the headquarters of export-oriented companies like Daimler, like Porsche, like Bosch, Stihl. So internationalization has always been vital for our economy, as well as politically and on the administrative level. And business relations are close between our two countries. In fact, the US is the #1 target country for delivery of goods from Baden-Württemberg. And we export more to the US than to any other country in the world. Besides export of goods and services, we also benefit from US foreign direct investment in Stuttgart regions. To give you a figure, 279 companies in the region of Stuttgart are subsidiaries of US parent countries. And on European level, we are engaged in Brussels itself, you said so. We are engaged in several networks that facilitate the exchange of knowledge and mutual learning, and networks that are also helpful in forming a consortium for example, EU-funded projects. One of our core networks is METREX, which unites more than 50 European metropolitan regions and areas. What is very interesting is also that Europe's metropolitan areas, they vary in their regional governance, from voluntary cooperation to formalized institutions such as us, the Verbandregion Stuttgart. And we are considered a role model in terms of metropolitan governance, successfully navigating our political activities within the regional assembly, a directly elected regional parliament, Helmut Noe is part of. You already explained that I personally was president of METREX, and it is a very fruitful aspect of the work of METREX that members integrate their international partners and activities into the network. So in 2008, the METREX Climate Conference took place in Alexandria. As mentioned, it was in Alexandria, and it was an exceptional event. We have fruitful relations between the European metropolitan areas and regions and the US regions ever since. And for example, during the METREX conference in Stuttgart 2019, we had with us Maria Marquez, director of the Business Investment Group of Arlington Economic Development, and she gave a presentation about the successful settlement of the second headquarters of Amazon in Arlington County. You see, despite the different legal and political conditions, economic development, as well as creating attractive living conditions for workers and business in order to settle in our metropolitan regions, they are tasks that unite both the European and the US metropolitan areas.
Very good. I'm glad you mentioned the METREX conference in Alexandria. I looked at the conclusions last night, and I see they're very timely. I mean, it could have been conducted last year as opposed to 2008. So congratulations on that. And speaking of Alexandria, John Chapman, glad you're here. You have in your city a great deal of experience. Drawing lessons from not only Europe but around the world. The designs for your metro stations, the Alexandria waterfront. You've looked for inspiration from abroad for sustainability ideas in particular. But maybe you could talk a bit about any experience that Alexandria has had, you've had in looking at regions abroad, such as Stuttgart, and how they can be applied in the U.S. context.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you for the opportunity. Can you guys hear me? Just want to make
Yes.
sure. All right, perfect. I think as long as I've been on city council for the last 8 years, there has always been a push within our council as well as our staff to look broader than our borders for best practices. And we know that best practices do not end at the Atlantic Ocean. And so we are always looking kind of worldwide to what other countries and other regions within those countries are doing. We've had for a number of years, actually for a number of decades now, a successful Sister Cities program that has kind of pushed us in a meaningful way to continue to talk about our relationships with other countries and how we can work with each other. My recent trip with NVRC to Stuttgart, for me personally, opened my eyes. I had never been to the region, never been to Germany. And so to make some of the relationships as Bob talked about and see some of the cutting edge work and planning that they're doing and be able to frankly bring that back and talk to my staff at the city council level is almost immeasurable. Because then we can take those same ideas and try to see how we can, to be frank, copy them. Sometimes folks say, copying somebody is the best form of flattery. And I think that's the case here because we don't do this with any malicious intent. But we see and note that individuals around the world are possibly doing things better than us, and we want to emulate the best. And so, we do that for the benefit of our residents. Our residents expect us to be going out and looking and talking to those individuals who are doing things better, whether it's in tourism, whether it's with our infrastructure, as you noted with the waterfront. We've looked, frankly, at a number of communities that have development along their waterfront about what that looks like, what that needs to look like, and frankly, what environmental questions are they answering as they build development on their waterfront. I think that's for us a multi-tiered decision-making process that we go through because we're not just doing it for the development, we're doing it for the environment as well and for sustainability. And so, to the overall value, I don't think anybody probably on this call probably questions the value of these partnerships. I think everybody knows that they are definitely value, but I'll bring kind of a younger elected official, and I don't mean by age, I mean by experience, because Bob is definitely a veteran elected official, but as somebody that's just getting involved in politics, we don't have very many opportunities for professional development, shall you say, as an elected official. And this is a key one. These trips, this participation, these partnerships are a key professional development opportunity for elected officials. Because not only did I get a chance to go to Stuttgart and learn from the elected officials and policymakers there, frankly, within our own group, I had the opportunity to bounce ideas off of somebody like Bob, that's been in elected office, been in a mayor's seat where you've been an executive for an area, and not only, and be able to process what we're seeing. It's one thing for me to go to Stuttgart by myself, but it's another thing to go with a number of elected officials and be able to process what we're seeing and talk about how in real time things that we're seeing can work back home. And so this has been really an exceptional opportunity as well.
Great, and I'm really pleased you mentioned the professional development aspect of that, because it's so important for those who are in positions such as you occupy too, to understand how we're all struggling with the same kind of ever-changing world post-COVID, and so that there's that element. And Helmut Noe, you have your own set of experiences, in terms of international lesson learning, both on the board of the Stuttgart region and as an elected official. But maybe you could comment a bit on, what works best from your perspective, and as John described, how do you learn the most from other officials? And one question I always want to ask when I get the opportunity, what mistakes should we avoid? It's really great to borrow the positive experiences, but I think it's as important to learn from you where things haven't really worked so that we can avoid those as well.
Yes, thank you. I would like to start by underlining that Germany and the United States have a very special and close relationship. I was born in 1943, and when I think to the US, the Hoover Meal comes in my mind, which was named after President Herbert Hoover. When I was in school, we regularly received food and other aid from the US. I reside in the county of Böblingen, where a US military base is located, so the United States has been a part of my life from the very beginning, and I'm glad that this special partnership with Northern Virginia continues to this day. I have been a member of the Regional Assembly of Stuttgart since 1999, which is the same year that our partnership with Northern Virginia started. I'm proud that I have been a part of this partnership from the very beginning. I was deputy mayor of Leonberg until 2009. This town has almost 50,000 inhabitants, so I can assure that partnerships on a municipal or regional level are of special importance. Leonberg has partner towns in France and in Croatia. This is not only true for schools, clubs, and exchanges on administrative level, but especially between elected officials. The exchange is particularly beneficial when the two partners are very much alike and share the same challenges, as the case for the region of Stuttgart and Northern Virginia. Both regions have approximately the same surface area, population, economic drive, and significance with their states. These shared characteristics are the foundation for our partnership, helping us benefit from the mutual exchanges. In my opinion, other factors that help a partnership thrive are honesty and open dialogue. One must not be afraid to point out developments or projects that did not succeed on the ground floor or even failed. Of course, admitting mistakes or unforeseen issues is not popular amongst politicians, but this leads to building an honest relationship and helps to avoid making the same mistake twice. Also, the legal and political framework may differ in detail. There is a lot to be inspired from in such a vibrant and prosperous region like Northern Virginia. The region of Stuttgart is one of the world's leading central points for the automotive industry. You probably already know that Mercedes and Porsche have their headquarters in Stuttgart along with Bosch, one of the biggest German multinational engineering and technology companies. Nearly every fifth employee works in the automotive sector. Therefore, the current transformation process, which is characterized by automation and electrification of automobiles, is of particular importance to us. Countries like the US are an important market for our companies, and at the same time already have great experience in these new trends from which we can draw a lot of lessons from. As I said before, Northern Virginia is a very vibrant region that attracts a lot of new residents. We also experience this influx of inhabitants to our region and therefore plan for a transit-oriented development. Also, our region is the cradle of the car. We are trying to reduce road congestion by encouraging people to use public transport. Since we are responsible for regional planning as well as the region metro system, we aim for an integrated approach to transit-oriented development so that housing development is primarily being realized along the railway lines. In 2018, when visiting Northern Virginia, I was very blessed to see that the Metro Silver Line to and from Dallas International Airport also follows this approach, so that a denser settlement is achieved along metro stations. I was especially impressed by the big park and ride lots, allowing for commuters to park their automobile and use the metro. These are just two examples of how we can both learn from each other, since we have a mutual understanding of our challenges and opportunities, which, in my opinion, create the best results.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because one of our participants, John Friedman, raised the point that it seems like it's going to be falling to state and local jurisdictions in the U.S. and regional bodies in Europe to look outside our own experience and transfer these best practices, even in areas where we have different structures at play. So infrastructure is very much a key point, and maybe that's a good way of looking forward. And Bob, I'd like you to maybe get out your crystal ball and talk about some of the innovations that may be going on in Stuttgart, the German region, from which we might be able to learn and apply. I know one aspect of this that you and I outside this framework have been very interested in is refugee resettlement, which is a big social issue for this region, along with the infrastructure. But Bob, over to you for maybe a look ahead here.
I mean, I think both Nicola and Herr Noe touched on this, is electrification of the automobile industry. 50% of the greenhouse gases in our region come from the transport sector. And I think the one thing that we could do a better job at, realizing that our regional organization does not have the authority to require local governments to do things, is around EV charging infrastructure. How do we make it more available? How do we heat map where the cars are and ensure that as more and more folks buy, electric Mercedes and electric Porsches, that they have a place to charge? And on a recent trip, we saw a company that is using the street light infrastructure to use for charging for electric vehicles. And in fact, they've contacted us and asked if we would be interested in working with them in Northern Virginia. So I think that's one very particular area that we could do some more advanced planning at. And just very briefly on the changing demographics of Northern Virginia, we will be, after the census is final, a majority minority region. 27% of our population are immigrants. They contribute some $57 billion annually to GDP. And to be a successful economic region, we need to welcome them, Ambassador, and make them feel at home in our region. And the pandemic, I think, provided an opportunity for our local government. And Alexandria has done a great job in reaching out into the small business community, the medium-sized business community, to help them through this difficult time. Hopefully we're on the other end of that, but I think there were a lot of important lessons learned and that they were successful in addressing.
Great. Nicola, have you given some thought about a forward-looking cooperation, particularly within Europe, on a regional basis? Is that the sort of thing that occupies some of your thinking as you try to address not just the economic issues that we've talked about, but some of the social issues as well?
Yes, I would like to refer to Northern Virginia because it's of course characterized by a thriving economy, and there are a lot of lessons that we adopted in Stuttgart region. One very valuable lesson concerning the economic field is the innovative ecosystem in the US, which is very inspiring. We are we already talked a bit about it, but we are very proud of our own innovations in our respective ecosystem, especially since the four-wheeled automobile has been invented in Stuttgart in 1886 by Gottlieb Daimler. But there is a lot that we can learn from our transatlantic relations, from our transatlantic friends, especially concerning the willingness to take risks, as well as the role of private investors and venture capitalists for startup accelerators. And as Bob mentioned, we are in a time of transformation, and thus we need to empower innovation, not so much on a regularly political level as we usually do in Germany, but rather with the ideas of the US startup culture. There is one specific project I would like to mention, which is an example of this inspiration and cooperation with US counterparts. It's the project Startup Autobahn here in the Stuttgart region. It is an innovation platform and accelerator. It is founded in 2016 by Daimler and the US accelerator Plug and Play, working together with the Research Factory Arena 2036 and the University of Stuttgart. And Startup Autobahn really mediates between startups and large corporations, thus combining a specific technical know-how with comprehensive automotive expertise. And so the US spirit of innovation has arrived in this case, the Stuttgart region in the heart of engineering. You asked me also about the social lessons, lessons learned in the social field. I have to point out that the social affairs are not within the core competencies of the Verband Region Stuttgart. But when I think of our visit in Northern Virginia in 2018, I was really impressed by your approach concerning affordable housing in Fairfax County. As we learned, housing is becoming increasingly scarce and expensive in Northern Virginia, which is also the case in Stuttgart region. And this is one of the downsides of two thriving regions that attract a lot of new inhabitants. And this familiar challenge is approached in two very different ways. Whereas we almost entirely rely on the state and especially on the municipalities to create space for affordable housing, you cooperate closely with the private sector. And since municipal budgets are tight, explicitly also due to COVID-19 these times, a stronger cooperation with the private sector could certainly help overcome this challenge. Another aspect I was impressed is the beautiful shared spaces within the housing complex in Fairfax. As space for apartments is rare in general in dense regions, a shared space within a community is a smart way of making it more comfortable and spacious.
Very good. John, that might be a good transition back to you, because, you know, I know the city of Alexandria is struggling, you know, on the housing side as well. And there, again, you know, as Nicola pointed out, there are lessons to be learned back and forth. But one thing that I'm really interested in is, you know, how back to this this question of the social side of things. I understand Nicola's point, but you know, there really is a lot of important work going on, particularly in Alexandria with your community remembrance project, which is, I think, not just important for the city of Alexandria, but quite frankly for the whole country. But do you see ways that there might be, you know, as Dale pointed out, ways that we could learn from German experience on remembrance of the Holocaust with what you're trying to do in Alexandria?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the big takeaways from my trip there was looking at how Germany had had dealt with, the communication and the messaging around tough parts of their history. I think we have a number of areas, frankly, whether it's in the Deep South or places like Alexandria, where we have the opportunity to tell that story and tell it in a way that is understood for future generations, and pull it into kind of the common marketplace, shall we say, in terms of where our tourists come, where our businesses are, where our main downtown is. We have a number of historical assets that can be leveraged to tell that story in a meaningful way. And so seeing how Stuttgart region has done that gives us an opportunity to do that. I think the EJI project that you mentioned is a great way for the community to be pulled into what is, frankly, a much bigger national conversation. But I think we have a local opportunity here, specifically in Alexandria, as Dale and I have talked about on a number of occasions, to really use the assets we have to tell that story locally, so that people just don't focus on the total national narrative, but can really relate it to a number of the local assets and buildings that they see on a regular basis. Great.
Helmut, you've been to Northern Virginia as well. What are some of the things that you regard as innovations that you observed, and are they things that can be applied when you look at Stuttgart and region and its future?
I remember that one of the most pressing topics during our visit to Northern Virginia in 2018 was the bid for Amazon's second headquarters. More than 200 cities in Canada, Mexico, and the US offered tax breaks along with promises of improved infrastructure and other incentives in order to win the bid. At the end of the day, Northern Virginia and Arlington County were chosen, creating thousands of highly skilled jobs. As I recall, Arlington County was not chosen because it offered the highest tax breaks, but because Amazon favored the urban framework conditions, the quality of life, and attractive public transport. US companies and workers expect modern and sustainable framework conditions. The Stuttgart region can learn a lot from Northern Virginia and their experience with economic development and settlement of business. For us, the application of the Artificial Intelligence Innovation Park in Baden-Württemberg is a comparable project, also in a smaller scale. It is a statewide competition in which we unite the forces of 3 regions in Baden-Württemberg. We want to create an innovative infrastructure for artificial intelligence that is unique in Europe. An infrastructure in which companies can develop and test international market applications, products, and business models in cooperation with science, society, and public administrations. As was the case with the second Amazon headquarters, I hope that our interregional approach, as well as attractive and livable framework conditions, will lead to a successful application. Our municipalities and we as a region are expected to create conditions and the framework that meets the standards of companies that are often engaged in the global market. So as a member of both the Regional Assembly of the Stuttgart region and a member of the County of Böblingen, where the Porsche and Bosch Development Center is located in, can learn from our partners in Northern Virginia. Alongside the more technical exchanges and concrete projects amongst partners, these exchanges are also very beneficial for elected officials as a means of advice on policy. In order to stay competitive globally, we need to attract more investors and experts while at the same time securing climate-friendly energy production and adapting to the effects of climate change. Enabling green growth also needs adequate space for commercial and industrial estate. Space is a scarce resource in the region of Stuttgart, and it always helps to benchmark this development with other metropolitan areas. Learning new approaches on how to establish a competitive and at the same time sustainable metropolitan area may be a key topic for our future exchanges.
That's really a great summing up. I know that John had to leave for a city council meeting, so I really appreciate his being here to give a perspective of Alexandria. As we're approaching the end here, and I want to save one really important question that's come in from our audience, but we have to get used to finding ways to deal with each other in person as well as we're doing here on Zoom. And I just wonder, how you would see the regions, and this is kind of an open question for anyone who wants to jump in. I mean, sort of post-COVID, how are we going to adjust our engagement over the previous patterns? How can we work together and in this new information environment?
I'll just very briefly, we've been doing it for since March of last year. We were on Zoom with our friends in Stuttgart region and Kiel, Germany, around the pandemic. Number of webinars around a number of the green infrastructure issues, still with our friends in Stuttgart region. So it's still full steam ahead. Hopefully we'll be able to do people to people again. It's our plan, hopefully, to go back next spring with a delegation of elected officials and private practice practitioners. But we haven't stopped. So technology is a blessing and a curse, I guess, at sometimes. And for us, it's been a blessing. And Nicola and her staff and Mr. Noe and the regional council in Stuttgart have always been responsive and generous in providing time when we had important questions around issues that they were dealing with themselves.
Nicola, any observation on that in addition?
It's quite a similar view on that. Yes, of course, we are all very much looking forward to meet each other face to face again, no doubt.
Yep.
But we benefited from the additional opportunities to join meetings. For example, Thomas Kivitt, our technical director, participated in a talk with officials from Northern Virginia. Or Dale, he contributed to our online event last November that dealt with sustainable city regional development. This would not have happened without Zoom. And so let's call it, yes, we benefited from it also partly. However, to meet each other and also to see projects live, we are all looking forward to it, of course.
Well, great. As we wrap up here, I think this really has been a terrific opportunity. The discussion, really indicates that we're talking to people who don't need the encouragement that Dale and I are trying to create in other parts of the United States. For this mutual learning experience, the fact that we may have differences in terms of forms of government and structures of decision making, but we can learn from each other. I will just close with this question from JB in the audience, which is the 64, as we say in America, the $64 question. We've spent an hour talking about all the benefits of international cooperation at the local level. And so JB's question is, well, how much influence does that have on international relations? Do diplomats and foreign secretaries listen? And as a former diplomat, I will say not as much as we should, but I think there's going to be more of that going on, because there's a greater recognition that international relations are more than diplomatic exchanges between Washington and Berlin and Brussels. It really is about how do we serve our own people, and as Nicole pointed out, we have mutually foreign direct investment from our two countries in our partners. And so there's not a competition here. There's a mutual benefit. And I don't know where the Biden administration is going to go with this idea of foreign policy for the middle class, but what it does imply is paying a lot more attention to what goes on outside of our little bubble here in Northern Virginia and the Beltway. To our German colleagues, I don't know whether you have a different answer, whether foreign secretaries in Berlin will pay more attention to regions now.
I'd say that, of course, we do not have that big influence, but we give an own stability into the international relationship through our cooperation.
Yes.
We have it in our hands, and we continue whatever happens. And this is a very important aspect for the stability of the overall global situation. And I think it's also important that on local level, we do not have a very strong influence in international relations, but in policy making, because inside views, they are asked by policymakers. That's what we do on European level. It is a kind of consulting. They need to know what really happens on the local level. And that's our big task to tell them. And the more we know, the better we can consult. And having own international relations again helps also to give a good input into European policy making, for example.
I would concur, Rich. I mean, we have two U.S. senators, both who have been governor. One was a mayor and a city council member. Congressman Connolly, who was chairman of our commission and a local government official. And so they've taken those experiences and have brought them up to the federal level. And they ask us, they'll say, hey, we're doing this, we're doing that. What do you think? And so it's been valuable, and I have nothing but encouragement for folks who are involved in local level moving up, because it provides a great platform for local issues to be risen up to higher levels of government.
And I think the point about introducing a stability to a broader relationship because of the contacts that are economic and people to people is really, really critical here. Well, look, we have no more questions from the audience, and we've used our time wisely with excellent discussion. Thanks to all the panelists, both in Germany and in the U.S. This has been it's been fun for me. But perhaps just in closing again, to thank Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung and the Northern Virginia Regional Commission for this opportunity. I hope we can do more of these kinds of things in the future. From George Mason University's point of view, we would love to be part of that.